how to drive a dog sleigh. In a dog sleigh, there's a place for a passenger, there's a place for a driver, there's a place in front for the dogs, and everybody should be facing the same direction. Generally, if we've got two people in a sleigh, it doesn't matter who is first driving, who is first sitting, because halfway on all of our tours, you will get to swap. And ladies, don't let the guys have all the fun. It's fun to be a passenger, but it's also really fun to drive a sleigh. And it might be your only chance in your life to drive a dog sled high above the Arctic Circle. So give it a go. If you're a passenger, then when you first come to your sleigh, you're probably interested in going and running over and saying hi to your dogs, but your dogs at that point are probably not so interested in saying hi to you. People often ask us, is it hard to train a sled dog? And it's really not hard to train a sled dog to run, but it's pretty challenging to train a sled dog to wait patiently. So the longer it takes you to get into the sleigh as the passenger, to get onto the sleigh as the driver, and for everybody to be ready to set off, the more problems we tend to have. So let's get in, let's get on, and let's go as quickly as we can. For the passenger, rather than stepping into the sleigh, you might go through, and it's also quite slippery. We're going to put one foot on either side of the sleigh. You're then going to sit down on top of the reindeer skin and move your bottom all the way to the back of the sleigh. It might be a bit of a squeeze for those of you who are a bit bigger to fit your arms in too. But it's important to be cocooned well within the sleigh and definitely not to hold on with your arms on the outside of the bars, because if you're not so sure about the quality of the driver you're going with on safari, and they do tip the sleigh, if your hands are on the outside, you're going to hurt them. So keep them inside and hope for the best. For your feet, they're going to go on top of the blanket that's also at the bottom of the sleigh. So it's going to be reindeer skin, blanket, feet, and then the rest of the blanket we will pull back on top of you. Now the passenger has 3 jobs, and the first job is pretty easy. This is your moment to relax. This is your moment to glory in the experience, to enjoy the ride. The driver has all the stress. They are doing many, many new things that we are going to teach you in a minute, all at the same time. In my country, in England, we say that it's hard for men to do more than one thing at once, but we have seen that it's pretty hard for a lot of people. So when you're the passenger, this is your moment to relax. The second job for the passenger is to be the photographer. The driver has to always have their hands on the handlebar of the sleigh, whether they're moving, whether they're stationary, so they have no chance to take any pictures. If they are taking pictures, my guides might even take the phone away from them because they're not taking seriously the responsibility for the safety of themselves, the safety of the passengers, and most importantly, the safety of the dogs. So as the passenger, take all the photos, take all the selfies that you both would like. The third job of the passenger is to help the driver by paying attention to the dogs. Now the dogs are on a long line in front of the sleigh, usually 2, maybe 1 or 2 in the middle, 2 again at the front, and they're separated by a little bit of distance between each pair. And it's important to maintain that distance and to keep the line that they're attached to tight at all times. That means that the dogs don't bunch up together. It means that you can't run into the dogs from behind. So we're essentially regulating the speed of the sleigh relative to the speed of the dogs to keep that line always tight when we're driving a dog sled. Usually also there's one dog on either side of the main gang line. But sometimes with the young dogs, they might go to the same side as their partner just for some security. They might even not be able to make up their minds and they might keep changing sides. And that's not great, but it's fine. There's no need to stop and tell us, as long as all 4 legs of the dogs are moving smoothly and normally. But if you see that a dog has gotten a little bit tangled in the line, if you see that a dog is going to the toilet, number 1, number 2, If you see that a dog has stopped to sniff something and all the other dogs have kept going, anything at all that looks unusual with the dogs, then that's when you, the passenger, say to the driver, hey, pay attention. Have you noticed there's a problem with the dogs? Do something, and we're about to tell you what to do. So, for the driver, once your passenger is securely, comfortably seated in the sleigh, it's your turn to take your place behind the sleigh. You have a last moment to finish any final preparations with your hat, with your gloves, etc. And then put your put your hands on the handlebar of the sleigh. And then from that moment forward, it even says, "Don't let go!" exclamation mark. So you're going to promise us that once you've taken ownership of the sleigh, you're not going to let go. Promise. Your 2 feet then go onto the brake behind the sleigh. Many of our sleighs have got 2 different types of brakes. One is a mat, which if it falls down today, you're just going to kick it back up with your feet because we're going to use it next time you return for a longer tour, but not today. So the brake for you today is just a metal bar, a simple metal bar behind the sleigh. Put 2 feet on that bar, and then when your 2 hands on the handlebar as well, we know that you're ready to go. We will come up behind you and untie the rope that is otherwise holding your sleigh. And at that point, it's your weight on top of the brake that's keeping everything stationary. Now, for the tiny people in the group, if your weight is not sufficient, the dogs might already start to move forward, and you'll be struggling to hold them unless you really use your active girl power, your force. And to do that, you need to lift up the handlebar using your lats and your biceps, so lifting up slowly but strongly, and that forces the brake into the floor, into the snow. So the inverse forces hold you more steadily in place. When everybody is ready to go, we will start to send off each sleigh one by one. We start with the first sleigh. We give you this signal, let's go. But to the second sleigh, we say, wait, because we always just need to make sure that the first sleigh's driver doesn't immediately fall off, that all is well with the dogs, that they settle fine into the run. And when all is good, second sleigh, let's go. Third sleigh, okay, you go too. So there might be a momentary gap between setting off each sleigh. So this hands out in front of the body from us to you is our signal to wait. It's also our signal to stop. Keep your feet on the brake, put your feet on the brake. We have 204 dogs at the moment, and they're not all best friends. So one of the very first things to be aware of on the start line is to make sure that if we set you off in the 3rd position, you don't immediately overtake sleigh number 2 and sleigh number 1. We want to make sure that you always stay behind the sleigh in front of you. We never want to have a situation in which the dogs from sleigh 3 come parallel with or overtake the dogs from sleigh 2. We try really hard to make sure that all of the dogs in sleigh 3 are friends. We don't even always get that right because they, like us, can have a bad day, but we try our best. But we can't possibly think about the potential combinations of all of the dogs in sleigh 3 with every other dog team in the field. So we trust you to always keep your distance behind the sleigh in front. It is a journey that we're going on today. It's not a race, so overtaking is not part of the challenge. So if you do overtake the sleigh in front, you might find that the guide's heart starts to beat quite loudly in stress, particularly if they see a grumpy female next to another grumpy female in a different sleigh. Female dogs tend to be more difficult than the males. They're just like us. If they dislike one other female, they will carry that dislike, that grudge for the rest of their lives. So they might have to start shouting at you quite quickly, stop or go, to whichever sleigh looks more switched on at that moment. The dogs are very unpredictable, and so are you. So we're doing our best with these instructions to give you all of the tools that you need to come back safely and to bring your dogs back safely too. So when you're stood on the brake, ready for that let's go signal, that's when your heart is also going to be beating fast. It's okay. It is totally possible for everybody in this group to drive. My mother stopped driving on her 90th birthday. My child started driving when he was 2.5. So anyone within those age parameters should be absolutely fine. But if your heart is pounding at the beginning, all is good. Everything that's great in life is usually a little bit nerve-wracking in the first few moments. After you get the signal to go, all you have to do is take the pressure off one of the feet on the brake and move that foot to the runner on either side. And that release of pressure should be sufficient. Meow, the dogs should set off. Stay with your other foot on the brake for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Essentially enough time for you to calm down and to relax and to think, oh, super easy. What was she talking about for so long? No problem. I can do this. But also to make sure that all of the dogs get a chance to settle slowly into their running style. We don't want them to go from 0 to 100 instantaneously. That's not good for them. They're not warm. And particularly the old dogs who are a bit more like meow when they start, they need an extra moment or two to settle into the run. But when all is good and you feel confident, take your other foot off the brake, put it onto the second runner, and this is your stable position in all sports, with your feet underneath your shoulders, your tummy tucked in, and your knees flexing to absorb any small bumps. If we feel that you're going too fast, maybe the sleigh in front of you is going a bit more slowly, we might use a up and down signal out to the side with our arm. This is our slow down signal. Put one foot back on the brake. If we need you to stop for some reason on the start line, maybe the sleigh in front of you has stopped, we will give you the same stop signal we showed you earlier. Pop your 2 feet back on the brake, wait for us to say, let's go again. Sometimes we notice just after you've started that maybe one of the dogs has a twisted harness or a twisted neckline. They've jumped across the rope at the very last minute. If we stop you before you go off on your 5, 12 or 20-kilometer tour, the dog doesn't need to run with that twist in its line. So we might try and sort out all the small problems just before you finally go. Now there's 2 more things that sometimes go wrong at the start. One of those is that we have some people who come off the brake, put their foot onto the runner and then go, ah, and they scream their way, brake fully on down the start line. And if that's you, then eventually we will say to you, get off the brake, you're okay, because actually having 2 feet on the runners and absorbing any bumps with your knees is a much more stable position to be in than with 1 foot on the brake. And conversely, for the bigger people, or indeed for anybody who's done a really good job of pushing the brake deeply into the snow to hold the dogs in place, it could be that you come off the brake with 1 foot, full of nervous anticipation about going, and yet nothing happens. If the dogs don't feel the transfer of weight, they don't realize that you think it's time to go. So in that situation, you do have to take the second foot off the brake. And if the brake still hasn't popped out of the floor, you might need to push 1 time just to create a little bit of slack in the line to break the inertia. The dogs understand to go. You're ready to go back on the brake and slow down again to make sure they don't set off too quickly, and all is good. But be careful. Occasionally we have people who come off the brake with 1 foot, don't remember what to do. We shout push, and they leave their remaining foot on the brake while they push with the first foot that they moved. So they're braking, pushing, braking, pushing, braking, pushing, not going anywhere. They usually say to us, it's not working. And we say to them, then take your foot off the brake. They take their feet off the brake and they fall flat on their face. So just practice 2 feet to 1 foot. Meow. No movement. Okay, take the other foot off. Meow. No movement. Push with either foot to release the brake. and off you go. So that's essentially how you set off from the start line on a dog sled. Now, obstacles. Before you come to a corner, slow down. In the corner, go back to your stable position, look where you're going, and your weight will naturally follow. It's just exactly what you would do on a bicycle without thinking about it. So don't stress too much. You're only going 10 to 12 kilometers per hour. You're not sliding out around corners on sheer ice. So don't worry too much. But if you do lean too much and you start to tip, no problem. Just jump to the ground with your legs, run a few meters, jump back on, and all is well. If you tip over completely at any point, again, no worries, because all of you promised to hold on tight. And because you are not letting go, then very quickly the extra friction of the snow going down your neck should bring the dogs to a halt. Don't be tempted to stand up and brush the snow off immediately. If you do, often the weight of the passenger is gone. You're not quite ready as you lift up the sleigh. The dogs literally wink at each other and off they go without the both of you. Just wait for us to come and help you, or work well as a team with your partner. Communicate that you're going to lift up the sleigh, keep the weight inside, jump straight to the brake, and give the dogs a moment or two to sort themselves out before you go. If you're the passenger and you see a snowmobile come zooming up beside you, it's probably because the person with whom you thought you were having a conversation behind you driving the sleigh has already fallen off a while ago. The snowmobile will always go to rescue the passenger and the driver. And for the person who has fallen off and let go, they have to do the run of shame as quickly as possible to try and catch back up with the sleigh. 95% of the time when we have a problem, it's simply because a driver has tried to take a sneaky photograph. So if you don't take a photograph, all should be good. On the uphills, kick, help the dogs. If they come to a halt and look at you, they're telling you you need to work harder. Jump down and run and push the sleigh. Same thing if you have a sleigh that is a little bit slower than a sleigh in front. It's not a big deal. We're on a journey, not a race. But you can kick from time to time. Just don't kick so vigorously that you leave your dogs behind. We occasionally see people doing that. Remember that the gangline has to be tight at all times, paying attention to the dogs and to your leaders in particular. On the downhills, brake. 1 foot on the brake protects the dogs from going too fast and potentially slipping. They have waited all year to run. We don't want them to fall and hurt themselves and be out for the winter season when they can have the most fun. So protect them. And same thing, if your sleigh is slightly faster than the sleigh in front, then just put 1 foot on the brake all the time, a little bit, as if you're a slightly heavier person. And that's actually much kinder to the dogs than braking, stopping, starting, giving a distance, going. Every time you stop and start, you're jerking the dog around. And also for the group, every time you stop, obviously the sleigh behind you has to stop, the sleigh behind that has to stop. And there's a bit of a domino effect through the group with everybody stopping and starting. It's not very smooth. So if you're on the brake all the time and somebody else is having to kick all the time, the guide can see that and they can see, oh, maybe if I swap a dog from this team to that team, it might regulate the speed or maybe even the people. So that's the easiest way to do it on the tour. For the shorter tours, we won't bother, but for the longer tours, we'll probably try and equalize the speed between the teams. But essentially, because the dogs don't like to stop and start, we don't want you to stop and start unless you absolutely have to. So if a dog is going to the toilet to do a pee or a poo, just slow down. At a slower speed, they'll do that more quickly, more easily, and then they can carry on. If the dog is tangled, same thing, slow down. Give them a chance to untangle themselves. They're really good at doing that because of how they live. And then as soon as they're untangled, just go back to your normal speed. So there's only really a couple of reasons that I can think of that you might need to stop unless we stop you. One of those might be if the lead dog does a number 1 or 2. When they do that, they stop dead in their tracks. There's no dog pulling them further forward. So you then need to react pretty quickly and stop too, because if you don't, obviously the line of the dogs will bunch together because the dogs behind will carry on running over the top of the lead dog that stopped. And eventually you could even hit into them all from behind. And if you ever get a situation where your dogs are completely tangled or you've overrun your lead dogs with your back dogs and they're wrapped around your sleigh, anything like that, obviously just stop completely. And in this one situation, you can take your hand off the handlebar, raise it up and say, "Help, I was a bad driver," and somebody will come and help you. If you drop your white iPhone in the snow, please don't tell us after the tour. But for an iPhone drop, for a gloves or a hat drop, just stop. You don't need to signal to us. The passenger can just jump out, pick up what it is that they dropped, and jump back into the sleigh. Do wait for the passenger to get back into the sleigh. Occasionally, we have people coming back without their passengers, which we think is quite strange. Obviously, easier to find a passenger than a phone in the snow, but easier still if you all come back together. If the sleigh in front of you stops for any reason, the sleigh behind has to also stop. So to make sure that you can do that without overtaking accidentally, give yourself a reaction distance between your lead dogs and the sleigh in front. We usually say that if you keep your lead dogs behind the line that's coming out of the back of the sleigh in front, that's trailing behind, if you stay behind that cord, that rope, that should buy you 2 or 3 seconds in which to react should the sleigh in front of you come to a stop. If you're a bit late and your dogs come parallel with the passenger of the sleigh in front, they might go pee-pee on them. That's not nice. If they come parallel with the dogs, we've already talked about the fact that you might end up with a fight. But another reason to keep that distance is because the sleigh in front of you's driver might be kicking to try and help her dogs, and she wants to trust that there's no danger of her kicking your dogs in the face if they are too close. But halfway round your journey, we will say stop with this same stop signal we talked about at the beginning, and we will give you a switch roll position signal. And at that time, come closer with your dogs, come right up to the heels of the sleigh in front, because the guide who's with you on the snowmobile will run down the line, checking everybody's noses, checking that all the dogs are still untangled. And so the closer together you are, the quicker they can do this. The way you should swap is for the passenger to get out of the sleigh on their own. Please do not be a gentleman. Please do not say, "Je peux vous aider," because you will not help your client. If your client then, you will not help your passenger if your passenger then disappears. So don't be a gentleman. Stay on the brake. Let your passenger come around to the back. They will put one foot on, you will take one foot off. They will put one hand on, you will take one hand off until they've got both hands and both feet on the sleigh. If they are smaller than you, sit down quickly. Don't take pictures at this point. Just put your weight as ballast into the sleigh. When you come back to the farm, we will try and point at a post against which you should stop so that we can quickly come over, tie up your sleigh, and then at that point you're safe to get out and go and say hello to your doggies. If you're on a longer tour, there may be a couple more things that we talk about. One would be the downhill on the 20-kilometer tour. That's a little bit steep and a little bit off camber. So just like when you're skiing, when you're carving, you need to keep your weight on your top runner, effectively your top ski, and brake on the downhill as well to keep the line tight. If you cross a road with us, roads are always very dangerous, so we always take them very seriously. The guide waits, helmet off, in the middle of the road, giving you one of 2 signals, come or stop. If there's no cars, they will stay in the middle and call you across. If a car is coming, they will go to your side of the road and give you the stop signal, ready to put their hands on the dogs. To be kind to your passenger as you approach the road, go slowly. There's a little bit of a bump from the snowplow on either side of the road. So slowly approach, go back to your stable position, plie as you take the little bump to the road. Do not brake on the concrete, it won't be good for the brake. Plie on the other side and then continue as normal. If you go to one of our wilderness cabins, we will help each team around the land area where we have the posts that we can tie the sleigh to. So the other teams will have to wait on the lake just for us to come one by one and help you. If you have a doggy that finds it really hard to wait, the passenger can always jump out of the sleigh and just calm that dog, or indeed keep the lead dogs focused. Every time one sleigh goes up onto the land and the person who's with you runs around with them, you can move your sleigh closer to the land too, and that will keep the dogs interest focused. As we run around the land area to tie your team to a post, we will have our hand on your rope of your sleigh and we'll be pulling you away from the interior posts so that you don't hit them as you go around. So you as a driver need to regulate the speed so that it's not so slow that we're really having to pull you, but also not so fast that we're falling over trying to keep up with the dogs. So just regulate the speed and follow the instructions of the guide. When we leave the wilderness cabin, the same thing. We will help you from the land area down to the lake one by one and make sure that you look after your dogs and keep them focused patiently while we wait for all the other teams to be ready and set off collectively once more. I hope you enjoyed listening to how to drive a dog sled. This is essentially the same instructions that we give people when they come into our yard, maybe with a little bit more detail. We are planning to use this as a training tool for new guides at the beginning of the season so that they have all of the information they need about how to teach people safely to drive a dog sled.